Hello guys, this is Aziz and we will get started with our webinar today. So I'm going to share my screen and I believe you can see it now. And here we have it. So for today, since I did not receive a lot of questions, or the questions were received very later in the day, I was not able to see all the questions. One particular question I saw was pretty specific, but I needed some more information by Kevin on his CSS question. So I'm going to get back to you, Kevin, in person, because I need some more clarification on what you meant by that question. So in that case, since I do not have relevant questions to cover in this session, I have decided that I'm going to cover a methodology I developed over the course of probably 10 years. Over time, I refined it, which helps me learn relatively quickly, so much so that I have not really mastered. I've mastered certain, but I have become professional and very comfortable at multiple professions. So to tell you a background story, when I was around 14, 15, or 16, I started learning Photoshop, and I had no tutor. Nobody taught me. I just opened it up, go to websites, I would look for tutorials, and I would just copy the tutorials. And back in the days, probably 15 years ago, there were text tutorials. Video was not big, or video bandwidth was not very merciful. It was pretty slow. So I used to copy along the text tutorials and would copy examples on creating some effect in Photoshop. And I would copy those things along, and I became over time internalized those methods, and eventually I became what I call the top 80% or top 90% of Photoshoppers in the world. Now, of course, that's self-proclaimed, but to me, it felt like that I just knew everything. Over time, then I got into web design, and I self-taught myself in a similar fashion. Later on, I actually became SEO, search engine optimizer, which can rank websites on the top of Google search. I also learned marketing, AdWords, media, marketing, advertising, and I professionally landed a job in one of the publishing companies, 100-year-old publishing companies. Then I became project manager, which is a totally different skill on managing large-scale projects, managing people, managing budgets, managing a timeline, breaking the timeline down, negotiating with people below you, negotiating with people above you. That was a relatively difficult thing for me on that level, and I learned that as well. And later on, I became a developer after that, which is front-end development at first, and then now full stack development, including back-end development and apps development and so forth. So I learned a multitude of these skills with this methodology. So I'm going to walk you through that methodology today so that you can learn 3x faster and do it without pain. Now, this is a diagram on this is you, right? This is the X, and this is you. And the circle around you is this is what you know. And usually what you do not know is always, of course, outside of what you know. But the good part is you know what you want to know. So what the goal is that you eventually make the circle of your knowledge bigger so that what you do not know becomes inside that circle. And eventually your circle of knowledge becomes bigger, bigger, and bigger. So that is the goal. And the litmus test to really prove to yourself that you know something or you do not is really what I go back to again and again, is what Einstein said. And what Einstein said is, if you can't explain it simply, you do not understand it yourself. Now, you may have debated to a friend or coworker or whoever about politics. You may support Trump, you may support Hillary. If you're in a different country, you may support Imran Khan from where I'm from, Pakistan, or the Noon League political party, or PPP political party, or if you're from India. there's Congress, and there's other parties that are there. So you've been in these debates where at times you feel like that you're defending your emotion versus defending your knowledge, or you're defending your point of view. You just believe in this particular person for whatever reason, and you have emotionally invested in that so much so that you're going to debate your heart out, and you know you're losing, but you're in a very vulnerable position because you can't explain your point. And that is the perfect opportunity to realize that you're defending something that you do not even understand it clearly. So you're defending something that you believe in, something that not necessarily is incorrect. It may be correct, it may be incorrect, but you do not understand it clearly, that point. And it takes a very wise person to admit that, yes, you make a good point to which I do not have an answer to. And the more quickly you do that, you are going to stop lying to yourself. And the beautiful thing about lying is that before a person lies to another person, they must lie to themselves first. So you are just fooling yourself before you're fooling others. So that is a great litmus test that Albert Einstein came up with, that if you cannot explain a particular concept of, let's say, Photoshop or functional programming or object-oriented programming or variables or arrays, if you cannot explain it simply, of course, you can use complex words which you can put over other people so that you can, as a technique to confuse them or overwhelm them. Just because you use smart words, that doesn't mean you understand it better. You're just imposing you're just intimidating them with those words, hoping to. And if the person is more clear in their ideas, the person you're debating with will eventually dismantle your point of view because you don't even understand it clearly, right? So that is a very important ideology or mental model by which I live by. I try to live by, but that just always comes back to my mind. All right, so now let's get to step number 1 of 5 on what steps I use to get very comfortable and confident with any new skill such that I can professionally land a job and do it very well. So much so that in all of these jobs that I've told you about, of course, Photoshop was not a job I was doing it on the side, just for fun. I got promotions in each one of them within the course of one year. So the first step is, before you get into any new skill, let's say you want to learn how to drive a car, or you want to learn how to change the engine of a car or change the oil. These are all the things that I do not know besides driving a car. So the first thing you need to understand, the first thing I would do if I wanted to learn how the engine works of a car and change an engine, is I need to see the big picture. Before I get into the details of, okay, this is this section and that section of the car, I don't even know what parts go into it. What I want to see is, what are the bigger pictures on how they interconnect. So let's say if you go to a new city and you want to navigate through the new city, you need to understand that there are roads, the concept of roads. You need to understand the concept of intersections. You want to understand the bigger important milestone landmarks of that city. So let's say if you're in Chicago, you want to know the Millennium Park, you want to know the Sears Tower or Willis Tower now called, you want to know these major landmarks, the river and so forth, so that when you can identify, you can look at the map, and when you can identify these bigger landmarks, you will be able to better navigate through the city. Of course, you're going to be lost at first, but you can navigate it better because you have the bigger picture. You have a map, you know the landmarks, you know how they interconnect. So similar to the way of software development, or learning how to do an engine, you want to know what is front-end development. You want to know what is development, what is engineering, what is software engineering, what is the difference. By the way, there is no difference between software engineering and development. It's just different words, programming, different words for the same thing. You want to know what backend development is. You want to know what data science is. You want to know how languages are built. Why do we have so many of them? Why can't we just have one? These are some basic questions that you may struggle with. And what you want to do is, number one, of course, you don't know the answer to them. So you just jot them down. Okay. And good for you. You have me as your mentor, so you can make the list of these questions and send it to me. I just do not get enough questions, even though I do these kind of sessions. I want you to give me clearly list of questions that you want answers to. And I would be very happy to answer each one of them, because I love doing this, and I want to give you that breakthrough. I want to give you that advantage that you can get only if you are clear on what you want to know. So see the big picture. And if you do not know the big picture, you ask all these 10, 20, 30 questions that will give you that clarity. So I'll take a 1 second break. I just want to make sure on one particular thing. So give me a minute. Okay, perfect. So I was just going to make sure if there's no problems in our session. So things look good. So continuing on. Okay. So step number 1 is see the big picture. Step number 2 is start micro. So now when you understand the bigger picture, which is the macro vision, you go into the details and you start micro. So you start with one thing. So once you get the answers to the big picture, you say, okay, now I want to discover Willis Tower. Okay, so you go into one particular piece. So let's say if you're learning programming, you say, I want to go dive down to the most fundamental thing, the baseline thing, which is the programming language itself, which is JavaScript. Or if you do not even know anything about front-end development, you want to start with HTML, which actually lays out the basic structure of the web page, because web development, front-end development is based on web pages. So you want to start with HTML and CSS. HTML first, CSS second, because CSS applies the styles to the HTML. So if there is no HTML, there is nothing to apply styles to. So you start with HTML, CSS, and you just ignore JavaScript, you ignore jQuery, you ignore APIs, you ignore everything else, and you just focus on HTML, and not with force or narrow vision. You just say, hey, this is the basics I want to learn first, and do it without stress, do it without judgment, do it without, oh my God, I'm so behind. Just forget that and have the fun in exploring what you're learning. And this is the same feeling like kids have, that they are, when you see a kid and they're trying to walk or talk or eat, they are not frustrated, they're not judging, they're just in flow and enjoying their experience. But as a kid grows up and they're trying to learn how to bike, or they're trying to learn how to swim, they will be a little bit frustrated and they will cry, just like I did, because I was learning how to bike and swim with my 1 year older brother, and he would be just better than me in these things. And I would be very frustrated and overwhelmed and felt that I was behind because I was slower at learning those things. And I would be extremely frustrated, judging myself in performance. So when that performance anxiety comes in, our performance diminishes. And I have these things with making these kind of videos as well. Whenever I'm making a course, I'm like, oh my God, am I explaining these concepts clearly? Or in a concise way? Am I communicating it effectively and stuff like that? Am I covering all the details? So I'm in so much stress, but that's not healthy. Although you will achieve your results, but it's just not fun. It's not smooth. It's very just overwhelming. So what I want to give the advice to you and to myself at the same time is that it's just unnecessary. It is just, you do the work and the stress is optional, and you're choosing that optional stress. It is totally unnecessary. It doesn't help you. It's just optional. Okay. So back to the point, start micro. So once you have the big vision, you go to one particular detail and just work on that one thing at a time, and you expand your circle one dot at a time. We have this illusion that people who are smarter than us, or perceived to be smarter than us, like, let's say for you guys, you might be thinking that he's so much smarter, he has done so much stuff, and he's made so many of these apps, and he's helping people and whatever, right? To you, I may seem to you as much more smarter, but it's what I've learned, and to me it's the same way. People who I perceive to be more accomplished, I think they're more smarter. But recently what I've discovered is they're no smarter than me. In fact, they just have used these simple methodologies and mental models and systems automatically, or they have learned or developed that helps them in a logical fashion, one thing at a time, accomplish one goal at a time, and they just keep on at it for a long period of time, and eventually they amass these small dots that I showed you. So over time they amass these small dots and these areas, and eventually their circle becomes so much big than ours, and we perceive, oh my God, they're so much ahead than us, they have accomplished so much more, and we just get overwhelmed or perceive that we are just so much smaller. So that is just an illusion. They are just no smarter than us. They just have worked at it for a long period of time at a simple method. And this is the method that you want to focus on. So number 3, once you figure out that micro thing and you do not know the details, of course you need a learning resource. So maybe a book or maybe a video course, like you have it over here, a mentor, I don't know, other ways to learn. Once you find a particular resource that you can trust, then you start imitating. And imitating is, as Steve Jobs said, good artist copy, or something like that. Great artist steal. Although I'm talking about copying, I'm really what I mean by that is to be good at accomplishing something. You want to shorten your learning curve. You want to copy and imitate something that you like. And this is as simple as building a calculator. When I was learning, what I just really wanted to make is a simple calculator. I really did want to make a simple calculator. And when I actually made that, I realized that it was not simple, as simple as what I thought. It had so many details that went into it, different functions. I had to organize the functions in a very distributed way so that it made sense and it wouldn't overwhelm me. It was a great learning experience. I learned the fundamentals of programming and how to structure a good application with just that basic example on the surface. But it was a very fundamental experience for me. So I was motivated to make this calculator. I was motivated to copy because that was the easiest way to learn. And just by copying somebody who's been there, done that, you automatically, effortlessly internalize their state of mind, internalize their concepts, internalize their methodology. So of course you're not always going to get in the first copy. You just keep on copying different examples. Make a calculator, make a first web page, make this particular CSS effect, make that particular CSS effect, and do not even attempt to memorize. As Einstein have said, do not commit to memory anything that can be looked up in a book. So I have never ever in my life attempted to memorize something besides when I was in school and I was advised to memorize certain concepts, which of course how practical that is, right? So you just internalize with practice. Step number 4 is, once you imitate without copying a particular tutorial or example, you re-imitate that, you do that particular example of code without looking this time. So when you say, okay, I made this successful piece of code, this particular blog or whatever, it should be a pretty small amount of code. You don't want to make a big project and then start copying a big project. That's just a waste of time for you to do it twice. These are smaller pieces of code, smaller pieces of functionality. You just delete that or put it aside, make a new file, and you say, okay, I know what to do. I know conceptually what to do. Let me do it without looking at the example. Now, of course, if you don't know what is the method to an array, you can Google that one particular piece of the reference, because this is just really a reference. You can look up the references. And of course, when you're stuck, you can relook at the reference of the tutorial. But the point is that when you attempt to do it without looking, you're going to really test yourself that you're going to be forced to remember and figure out the answer to where you're stuck without having an easy answer, without the reference, because you're avoiding the reference, right? So that is going to put your brain in a high gear and you're going to internalize your discoveries. You're going to start discovering. And one of the important concepts of learning is if you tell somebody the answer to a question, they're going to know the answer. But if you let them discover, they're going to remember it for the rest of their lives. So when you actually let your brain discover the answer, you're going to remember that. Instead, if you just look it up very quickly and know the answer, then you're just going to know the answer. You're not going to internalize that. You're not going to remember it for the rest of your life. And that's the difference. With that, let's move on to the fifth step, to make a personal cheat sheet. Now, when you have made learning particular technologies like JavaScript or React or Angular, there are certain concepts that, or Git, there are certain concepts that they have, like how to make a new repo, how to make push it to Git repository, how to pull. In React, there are components. In Angular, there are directives and models and views and controllers and stuff like that. So there are different concepts. And once you go through the first try, you're just going to be very unclear and distorted on what all these concepts are. So what you want to do is you want to make a personal cheat sheet, which is not going to be perfect in the first try. You just take out a piece of paper, and when you learn one particular concept, you jot it down, jot the title of it, and just put a little description and example of how to declare a directive, which is 2 or 3 lines of code. Right? So you declare a module, you say module.directive, put a name of the directive, and then it returns a function which returns a particular object, right? The simple steps to create simple fundamentals of what a directive is, okay? An example of a simple directive, the name, the directive, what a directive is, and a simple example, 3 things. And you do that for everything. So let's say for Git, you just put the Git command, what that Git command does, an example of how to use that command, right? Similarly, you do it for variables. So what is a variable? How do you make a variable? And give an example of doing that. So var a is equal to Aziz, var in quotes, so mention the quotes are important. And if you want to make a variable for number, say var n is equal to 55, right? So that will give you an example of how a variable is declared. And you put a description of what a variable is. A variable is something that stores value, and it is overwritable if you declare it in a var fashion and stuff like that. So you can put as much detail or as little detail as you feel comfortable with. There's no perfect formula, right? But this is something that it's for you. So you relook at it, and once you make cheat sheets for concepts that are really confusing to you, and I would recommend to make it anyways. And over time, you're going to have less and less need for that cheat sheet, and eventually you can throw it away, and you're just going to come back to it even less frequently. So they're just going to become irrelevant, and you can throw it away or keep it. That's on your personal thing. So that is a great way for you to simplify the concept that you have learned, because cheat sheet has to be concise. It doesn't have room for explanations. So it has to have the minimal yet necessary information to explain to yourself, your future self, what a particular concept is, because you're going to forget, but with practice, you're just going to know. So the 2 things that this does is goes back to the Einstein principle that if you cannot explain it simply, you do not understand it yourself. So if you cannot make a simple cheat sheet with simple instructions, with simple breakdowns, you do not understand it yourself. So that's the best, simple, and fastest way to get that feedback. And so that does the 5 steps on how I'm able to learn different skills and different distinct skills and do it pretty well. But there is a bonus skill, and the bonus step is to teach it to someone. And this you can do it to whenever you get the opportunity. If you're at work, you can explain it to you can help out other coworkers and explain them those concepts. And of course, you're not going to be always perfect, and this is your free practice. If you have the concept of meetups in your area, you can join a meetup group and be a speaker and teach these kind of concepts. If you have Note School in your area, which is like a workshop, for coding. You can volunteer as a mentor, so that if people have questions, they can ask you questions, and that'll give you the opportunity to give them feedback. So that does it. That does this entire session on how to learn 3x faster with 5 simple steps. And if you have any questions, we have a minute. I would be happy to answer that. All right, I do not see any question, but I see good participation today, better than normal. So that pretty much does it. I'm going to talk to you later, and if you have any questions, take my recommendation, jot down a list of questions you have, email it to me, and I will personally respond, or I'll respond on a future webinar. We have 3 more to go in our cohort, so I'll respond to them over the course of time, or immediately after you send me the email. All right, talk to you later.